Unit 10, 10.1, Scope and Conversion. Conversion was done already in Unit 3.3. If you want to go and check that out, you could review that. I'll touch on it slightly here because conversion tends to go with scope. Okay, we're talking about variables and we're talking about their scope. Scope means which block do you live in? Global scope, the variables are blue. They tend to be color coded so you could not make mistakes here. So this guy, the integer, and the cost, which is a double, these are global. What does that mean? They live in the entire class, the whole thing. Let me go ahead and take this out. I'll put it back, but we just want to see. Scope means blocks. So this guy value lives in this block. Same in cost. The ones that I had before, and I'm just putting them back, have the same variable name. Realize the word private is not in front. Okay, the word private is reserved for global scope. So this right here, this value and this cost are not these. This is two different variables. Same is true down here. This value is this value because this value lives in this scope. That's his block. This cost is not the cost up here. Neither is this cost either. This cost is this very own variable and it lives in this scope. Local. So global is the whole thing and local is any other block inside the class. Any other block. Now, the main method has its own scope. The increased value has its own scope and the increased cost has its own scope and the class itself has its own scope. Some people call this class scope, like it's in the entire class. Now, this value right here, once this method is finished, this value and this cost are erased from memory. Once this method is finished, this value is erased from memory. 4 bytes gone. Same here, cost is erased from memory once increased cost is finished running. Once we return, there is no longer this variable around. This up here though, this have a longer lifespan. They stay around as long as scope and conversion class is happening in RAM. Once that stuff is running, these two are still around. But these scope only come into being once this method gets called. And once it's finished, this is gone. So even though I have the same names, they're not the same variables. This could get tricky. So why am I showing you this is because you should avoid this. Okay, because this gets very confusing. Am I speaking about that value or this one or this one? Like which one am I talking about? That's not a good idea. So the best move here is to use different variable names based on what you want that method to do. Use a name that makes sense. So don't use names to get that confusion in your naming and scope as a confusion. But even though we avoid the naming issue, we still have to understand when we create a variable in a scope, it lives there. So let me go ahead and add some more. And I know you might be thinking, what? How does this work? Well, if the value is less than 20, I just created another scope. Let that sink in. See, now I could say int cost is equal to 30. It's getting more confusing. This cost has nothing to do with any of the cost that was there before. This one, that one up here, this one, this is a totally different cost. You want to tell you how funny this is? Let's see. Let's go ahead and see how weird this is. Let's see how weird it is. See this print? In your mind, you'll be thinking, oh, you're trying to print that cost? No. It's printing this cost. What? How does that work? This cost here only lives in this scope. Once this if statement is finished, it's erased from memory. This method here, even though the if statement is inside it, this cost only lives in the if. Because it was created in this scope, he lives in that scope. Let me go ahead and show you even more. Look at the color change. See, because I'm inside the if now, I'm printing this cost, not this one. Let that sink in. So you got to be careful. Once you create a variable, you must think, what scope am I creating this in? So if you want a variable to have the entire method scope, you could either take it in as a parameter or put it at the top. If you wanted this cost to be, so let me go ahead and take this out and show you what I mean. Look at the color change. See, that cost now lives in the entire scope of this method. So the if statement knows about it, and so does the method. So you got to be really careful. Now, the way to go about doing this is to use different variable names so you don't get confused. I'm purposely doing this to show you what not to do and how confusing it can be. But it doesn't change the fact that every variable gets created in a scope. Now, let me jump back to something that we did before. Now, I'm going to go to the conversions. Let's say I want to work in the main method. Let's say I wanted to take the cost and set it to the value. And again, 3.3 had this. You see how nice and easy that happened? What about if I don't go the other way now? We got a problem. Because not only we got to think about the scope, but we got to think about the type. Because cost is a double, I can assign an int to a double because I'm going from 4 bytes to 8 bytes. Widening conversion. Automatic cast. This is a narrowing conversion. Doesn't give an automatic cast on a narrowing. We have to convert it by casting ourselves. Now, in the top one, I could decide not to put this, or I could put it. If I take it out, it's the same. The system's going to do it for me. So, as you're thinking about making variables, then you have to think about the scope and the conversion. Make sure you know what type you want, and make sure you know which scope it needs to be in. I'm going to go a little bit further. Let me go down to the increased cost. Suppose I wanted to return an int. It's going to throw an error. It throws an error because the cost is a double. And you can't return a double if an int is expected. Why? It's a narrowing conversion. So if you want that to be the case, I don't know why you want that, but let's say you do, you better convert this to an integer. Let it sink in. I'm showing all the pieces here. How when you're working with variables, I'm using ints and doubles only because they are most frequently used, but these concepts go to any variable, any object, any data type. We have to think about two things. We have to think about the scope, and we have to think about the conversion. Once we're working with variables, doesn't matter what app it is, these two things are always there. So, first, try not to name your variables the same. Gets confusing. Can't keep track after a while. Use nice names that based on the method or whatever scope you're using. So that particular name makes sense in that scope. and then avoids the confusion. Keep scope in mind though. When you do create a variable, know where it lives. And don't try to access that variable elsewhere. See, just now if I made a cost variable in here, let's look at that again. I'm going to get rid of this one. Okay. This cost variable, that guy is only accessed inside the if. Once I go outside the if and I do cost, it's not going to be accessing this guy. He's now accessing this guy. Why? Because he lives everywhere. Every method has this guy. Every method in here could get access to that cost. But any variable that's made inside, oh, by the way, this is just an if statement. If I made a loop, the same thing, different scope. If I made a while loop, same thing. Okay, I could have said while value is less than 100, int cost. I'm not doing this to run the app. I'm just showing you scope. See, I'm inside the same method, but now I got 3 scopes. The method itself, the if statement, the while loop. I have cost, cost, and cost. No confusion here because different scope. Now, I don't normally do this. I don't name my variables this way so that I could get confused. But what I do keep in mind is when I do create a variable, int, double, string, whatever it is, I keep in mind what's the scope. And is it true that this may need to be converted to another type? Okay. We don't want to do a lot of conversions, but we can't avoid them. Sometimes it's necessary. So those are the 2 things you want to keep in mind once you're writing any variable. Okay. I'm not going to call these methods. I'm not going to do anything with this. I'm not going to run it or anything. The idea to walk away with is when you start creating a variable, you must think of 2 things: scope and conversion. That brings us to the end of 10.1.